The year was 1839. In the humid, marshy low country of Beaufort, South Carolina, a boy named Robert Smalls was born into a world of chains. At that time, the American South was a place where a person's worth was measured in labor and property. For a black child born into slavery, the future was a narrow corridor of hardship. But from his earliest days, it was clear that Robert Smalls was built for something greater. By the age of 12, Robert's mother, worried about his defiant spirit, arranged for him to be sent to Charleston to work. She wanted him to understand the harsh realities of the world, but instead, the city gave him the tools for his liberation. Robert worked on the docks, learning the language of the sea. He mastered the art of rigging, the mechanics of steam engines, and the treacherous geography of the harbor. The salty air and the vast horizon taught him a singular truth. The ocean has no master, and the wind blows free for everyone. As the clouds of the American Civil War gathered in 1861, Robert found himself working on a vessel that was the pride of the Confederate Navy, the Planter. This was no ordinary boat. It was a high-pressure steamship used as a transport for heavy artillery and the personal transport of high-ranking Confederate officers. Technically, Robert was just a wheelman, a glorified laborer. But the white officers knew the truth. Without Robert Smalls, the ship was blind. He knew every sandbar, every hidden rock, and every shift in the tide of Charleston Harbor better than the men who claimed to own him. But while Robert excelled at his job, his heart was heavy. He had a wife, Hannah, and 2 young children. In the eyes of the law, they were property that could be sold and separated at any moment. Robert looked at the massive Confederate flags flying over the harbor and saw a future of eternal bondage. He began to save every penny he could, hoping to buy his family's freedom, but he soon realized the price was too high and the time was too short. One evening, standing on the deck of the Planter under a moonless sky, Robert looked toward the sea. Far out in the Atlantic, past the reach of the Confederate cannons, lay the Union blockade, the ships of the North. To Robert, those ships weren't just vessels of war, they were floating islands of freedom. He whispered a vow to his wife that night: "I will not die a slave. We will either walk on free soil together, or we will find our home at the bottom of the sea." It was a terrifying thought. To steal a military ship from the heart of the Confederacy was an act of madness. It required not just courage, but the precision of a master thief and the nerves of a ghost. But as the war intensified, Robert Smalls began to realize that his opportunity was coming. He started watching the white officers, studying their habits, their voices, and their arrogance. He was no longer just a wheelman. He was a strategist, waiting for the perfect moment to strike a blow that would echo through history.
By May 1862, Charleston was no longer just a port. It was a fortress. The harbor was a gauntlet of death, guarded by 5 massive Confederate strongholds, including the formidable Fort Sumter. For Robert Smalls, the challenge wasn't just stealing a ship. It was navigating that ship through a maze of heavy artillery that could vaporize the Planter in a single volley. Robert knew that for his plan to work, he couldn't do it alone. He needed a crew. But in a world of spies and informants, who could he trust with a secret that carried the penalty of death? One by one, Robert approached the other black crewmen, men who, like him, had spent their lives under the lash. He gathered them in the shadows of the engine room, the heat of the boilers masking their whispers. "We have the ship," Robert told them, his voice low and steady. "We have the cannons, and out there, past the fort, is the Union fleet. If we reach them, we are free men. If we stay, we are cattle until the day we die." The men were terrified. They knew that if they were caught, the Confederates wouldn't just kill them, they would make an example of them. They spoke of their wives and children. Robert looked them in the eyes and revealed the most dangerous part of his plan. They would take their families with them. It was a staggering risk. If the families were caught boarding the ship, everyone would be executed on the spot. But Robert was adamant. Freedom was meaningless if his family was left behind in chains. He convinced the men to agree to a suicide pact. They decided that if they were discovered before reaching the Union lines, they would blow up the ship's boilers and sink the Planter, choosing a watery grave over the gallows. The plan was a masterpiece of timing. Robert noticed a pattern. The three white officers of the planter, Captain Relia, the mate, and the engineer, frequently spent their nights ashore in Charleston, leaving the ship in the hands of the enslaved crew. Robert's plan was set for the night of May 12, 1862. He sent word to his wife Hannah to prepare. She was to take the children and hide aboard another boat moored at a secluded wharf called Etwan Steamboat Wharf. At the stroke of midnight, Robert would pick them up. But as the sun set on May 12th, the tension reached a breaking point. One of the crew members began to lose his nerve, his hands shaking as he shoveled coal. Robert pulled him aside, his grip like iron. "There is no turning back now," he whispered. "Tonight, we sail for the North Star." As the white officers walked down the gangplank to spend their evening in the city, they waved a casual goodbye to Robert, never suspecting that the man they viewed as property was about to steal the most valuable asset in the harbor. Robert watched them disappear into the city lights. He then turned to his crew, his face a mask of cold determination. The stage was set, the boilers were hot. The most daring heist of the American Civil War was about to begin.
Midnight, May 13th, 1862. While the city of Charleston slept, the air around the docks of Southern Wharf was thick with a tension so heavy it felt like it could snap. The white officers were gone, lost in the comforts of the city. Robert Smalls signaled his crew. They moved like shadows. To avoid drawing attention, they didn't start the engines with a roar. They eased the pressure, slowly letting the planter drift away from the pier. But first, they had to make a stop. Robert steered the massive steamer to the Etwan Wharf, where his wife, Hannah, his two children, and the families of the other crewmen were hiding in the darkness. As the families climbed aboard, the atmosphere was electric with fear. The women held their breath, and the children were told that a single cry would mean the end of their lives. Once the families were hidden below deck, Robert stood at the helm. He knew that the 5 Confederate forts guarding the harbor were manned by sentries with telescopes. If they saw a black man at the wheel, the alarm would be raised instantly. Robert stepped into the captain's cabin and retrieved Captain Relia's trademark wide-brimmed straw hat and his long, formal overcoat. He put them on. In the shadows of the wheelhouse, Robert's silhouette transformed. To any observer from a distance, he was no longer a slave. He was the captain of the planter. As the ship steamed toward the open sea, it had to pass several checkpoints. At each one, Robert pulled the cord for the steam whistle, sounding the precise Confederate signals. 2 long blasts, followed by a short one. He stood on the deck, his arms folded across his chest in the exact posture of Captain Relia. He even mimicked the captain's walk, pacing the deck with an air of authority. The sentries at the first few forts looked out, saw the familiar ship, saw the captain at the helm, and signaled back, "Proceed." But the greatest test lay ahead. The massive, dark silhouette of Fort Sumter began to loom out of the morning mist. This was the most heavily armed fortress in the South. Its cannons had started the Civil War, and they were more than capable of ending Robert Smalls' life in a heartbeat. As the ship steamed toward the shadow of the giant stone walls, the crew huddled in the engine room, their hands on the valves. They had a pact. If the fort opened fire, they would blow the boilers. They chose to be blown to pieces rather than be taken back to the whipping post. Robert Smalls gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. He was now so close to the fort that he could see the sentries' faces. He pulled the whistle cord one last time. The sound echoed off the stone walls of the fortress, a lonely cry for freedom disguised as a loyal signal. The world seemed to stop. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, through the fog, a voice from the fort called out, "Pass, the planter." Robert tipped his straw hat to the sentry, a final act of cold brilliance. He had just fooled the heart of the Confederate defense. But as the ship cleared the range of Fort Sumter's guns, a new danger appeared on the horizon. The sun was rising, and the Union blockade, the very people they were trying to reach, saw a Confederate warship charging directly toward them. As the planter cleared the shadow of Fort Sumter and steamed into the open waters of the Atlantic, the crew let out a muffled cheer. But Robert Smalls did not celebrate. He knew they were now in the most dangerous no man's land on Earth. Behind them, the Confederate lookouts at Fort Sumter were beginning to realize something was wrong. The sun was up, and they could now see that the captain they had saluted was not Captain Relia. The alarm was raised.
If the planter turned back now, they would be blown out of the water by their own side. But ahead of them lay an even greater threat. On the horizon, the massive wooden hulls of the Union blockade emerged from the mist. The lead ship, the USS Onward, saw a Confederate steamer charging toward them at full speed. To the Union sailors, this wasn't a rescue mission, it was a suicide attack. "Action stations!" the Union captain shouted. On the deck of the USS Onward, sailors scrambled to their positions. Massive 32-pounder cannons were pivoted and leveled at the planter. The gunners blew on their slow matches, waiting for the command to fire. A single shot from those guns would turn the wooden steamer into a floating coffin for Robert, his crew, and their families. On board the planter, panic began to set in. They saw the Union cannons pointing directly at their faces. "They're going to fire!" someone screamed. "We've come all this way just to be killed by the North!" Robert Smalls acted with the speed of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his dreams. "Take down that flag!" he bellowed, pointing to the Confederate colors. As the rebel flag hit the deck, they realized they had no Union flag to raise. They were still a target. In that moment of life or death, Robert's wife Hannah stepped forward. She had brought with her a white bedsheet intended for their new life. They tied the bedsheet to the halyard and hoisted it high. On the USS Onward, the Union captain peered through his glass. He saw the white flag fluttering in the morning breeze. "Belay that order!" he shouted, just seconds before the guns were fired. The two ships drifted closer until they were side by side. The Union sailors looked down in disbelief. Instead of a crew of Confederate officers, they saw a group of black men, women, and children cheering and weeping with joy. Robert Smalls stood on the deck, took off the captain's straw hat, and called out to the Union commander. "Good morning, sir. I have brought you some of the old United States guns and a few people who will be true to you as long as the sun shines." The Union sailors broke into a roar of applause. Robert Smalls had not only delivered himself and 16 others to freedom, he had delivered a fully armed warship, a secret Confederate codebook, and a cargo of heavy artillery destined for the rebel forts. As Robert stepped onto the Union ship, he felt the wooden planks beneath his feet. For the first time in 23 years, he wasn't standing on a piece of property. He was standing on free soil. But his journey wasn't over. He wasn't just going to be a refugee of war. He was going to become its hero.
The news of Robert Smalls' daring escape hit the United States like a thunderclap. In the North, he was hailed as a brilliant hero. In the South, a massive bounty was placed on his head. But Robert wasn't interested in fame. He wanted to finish the fight. The Union Navy was so impressed by his knowledge of the southern coast that they did something unprecedented. They put him back on the planter as a pilot for the United States. Throughout the war, Robert flew the Union flag over the very waters where he had once been a slave. During one fierce battle at Folly Island, the white captain of the planter became paralyzed with fear under heavy fire and surrendered. Robert, knowing that the black crew would be enslaved or killed if captured, refused to surrender. He took command of the ship, navigated it through a storm of cannon fire, and brought the vessel to safety. For this act of bravery, Robert Smalls was promoted to the rank of captain, becoming one of the highest-ranking and highest-paid black officers in the entire war. But his influence went beyond the deck of a ship. He traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Abraham Lincoln. He showed the president that black men were not just willing to fight, they were tactical experts capable of extraordinary feats. His testimony played a vital role in Lincoln's decision to officially allow black soldiers to join the Union Army, a turning point that helped win the Civil War. When the war finally ended in 1865, Robert Smalls returned to his hometown of Beaufort, South Carolina. In an ultimate act of poetic justice, he used the prize money he earned from capturing the planter to buy the very house where he and his mother had been enslaved. He didn't return as a servant, he returned as the master of the estate. Robert's journey didn't stop at the docks. He entered politics, believing that true freedom required the power of the law. He helped draft the state's new constitution and was eventually elected to the United States Congress, where he served 5 terms. He fought for public education, civil rights, and the protection of the poor, famously saying, "My race needs no special defense, for the past history of them in this country proves them to be the equal of any people anywhere." Robert Smalls passed away in 1915 in the very house where he began his life in chains. He left behind a legacy that proves that no wall is too high and no fortress is too strong for a mind determined to be free.
From a slave to a thief, from a thief to a captain, and from a captain to a congressman, Robert Smalls didn't just steal a ship, he stole the future back from those who tried to take it away.